think that the main obstacle preventing leaders from doing the right thing lies in everything around the leaders. Now, what I mean by that, my upbringing was in South Africa. And if you contrast the philosophy of the Southern African region, the philosophy of Ubuntu, with, say, the Western philosophy of Descartes, Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. Everything's self-centered. I am all I need to be, and everything I am is all that I need to look at. The Ubuntu philosophy says, I am because we are. And what that says in a leadership context is the type of leadership that I demonstrate is not purely because of who I am, it's very much interwoven with who everybody else is, the type of leadership everybody else is educing from me, the organizational structures that we're all embedded in, and the type of leadership that that makes easy, and the type of leadership it makes difficult. What I've come across is a number of leaders who, if you take them out of their environment, are exceptionally good moral people, and they would love to be leading in that way. But when you put them into their environment, the space that they are able to move in easily is not the space that we would associate with moral leadership. So part of what I'm doing at the moment is to explore and experiment with different ways of structuring organizations, different protocols for the kind of dialogue between people in organizations, different, I could almost call it the hardware of leadership if I think of the moral values of the leader as the software. How can I create different hardware that will enable different software to function? I think that they have to coexist. And I will take perhaps a metaphor from farming. There's no farmer on the planet that would plant more seeds than they're able to harvest at the end of the year. No farm can function without being extremely profitable. They have to get more grain harvested at the end of the year than they plant at the beginning. Now, for me, spirituality is expressed in terms of what you do. So I would argue that a farmer that is feeding an entire community, the work of that farmer is extremely spiritual. It's directly connected with nature. That is spirituality in action. And it is extremely profitable. So I would say that spirituality and profitability actually has to be combined, that you can't be, in a sense, you can't be really spiritual without generating far more value than is going in as a starting point. The issue is how you define profitability. What is the purpose of profit? To what purpose, to what use do you put it? That's where the issue comes. So I would turn that question around, and I would say the question is, how can you be both spiritual and profitable? If you try to separate them, both lose. If you find a way of combining them, both win. And the metaphor for me of the farmer is one that I use to guide myself. That's my example of how profitability and spirituality is effectively combined. So in my day-to-day work, I look for ways of recreating that analogy in my context. One of the things that has come out of research into how the human being develops during the course of his or her life has shown very clearly that as people gain in experience, the breadth and depth of their thinking increases. Now, at the highest level, that means that people think in terms of the entire planet, in terms of humanity, in terms of the universe. If you look at the companies that have been around for over 100 years, over 150 years, you look at any government, any other large organization, the leader of that organization, everything that they are thinking about today, the decisions they're taking today, will continue to have ripple impacts 50 to 100 years down the line. For that organization to be successful, the leaders have to have a consciousness that thinks 50 to 100 years in the future. If they can't do that, the organization is highly likely to create in today's decisions seeds of destruction that will grow in tomorrow's world. And in that sense, it's the spiritual aspects of the leader, whatever spirituality may mean for them, that is part and parcel of their ability to think in 50 to 100-year horizons, to think about humanity in the way that they think about their decisions. And so I'll argue that every single company that is around today, that is over 100 years old, is here because of the spiritual nature of the leaders 100 years ago. We've entered the first time in the history of the planet where people are referring to today's era, the geologists, as the Anthropocene. It's the area where mankind has shaped the geology of the planet more so than any other force of nature. It's the first time that the human race has ever had to accept accountability for the entire planet. And the first time that the human race has been in a position to choose between either going down a path of destruction primarily for ourselves as the human species on the planet, but also causing damage to the rest, or down a path of entering a new level of maturity as a species. And to the extent that the leadership on the planet, both inside for-profit business, in non-profit business, in government, the extent to which the leadership is able to expand their consciousness across all of humanity to take into account all of the needs of the planet, to the extent that they're able to do that, we will be able to choose the path that we would like to be on. To the extent that they cannot, we will default to a path that we will not want to be on in 50 years' time. So the need to have a spiritual dimension, a long-term breadth and depth of thinking is greater now than it ever has been. Fortunately, at the same point, we have more leaders on the planet who have the life experience necessary for them to be able to do that.